Good afternoon and welcome to the third series of Let's Talk Poultry. My name is Rebecca Tierney and I am the Poultry Advisor for Teagasc. I am delighted to bring this series to you, our Irish poultry producers. This is a 5-part series covering a range of topics relevant to all sectors of our poultry industry. I am joined today by Conor Sheehy, who will present on biosecurity and its importance. On June 30th, Martin Dempsey, a commercial broiler grower, will be joined by an SEAI representative to discuss the SSRH and his experience of the application, installation and utilisation of a biomass boiler. On July 14th, Robbie Hagwood will join me to look at the importance of good flock recording and how it can ensure your farm is performing to its optimum. Ellie Radford, Hoover Pharma, and Callum Turner, St David's Poultry Team, will then speak to us on Coxie on July 28th, how best to prevent it, its impact on production, and the clean out following an outbreak. And finally, Conor will return to speak to us on what footpad dermatitis is and how it occurs, how to manage it, and why it is important. These webinars will be recorded and will be available to view on the Teagasc website along with the presentations. You have the opportunity to send in your questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We will answer these questions following Conor's presentation. Our first webinar today is on biosecurity. In the last 15 months, the world has been faced with a global pandemic due to COVID-19. We all face multiple lockdowns, limited movement, and recurring threats. For the poultry industry, this is something producers are all too familiar with. Disease threats occur on an annual basis with avian influenza, salmonella, and now avian ILT. The importance of biosecurity simply cannot be understated. I will now show you a short video Teagasc have produced on the importance of biosecurity. My name is Rebecca Tierney, Poultry Advisor with Teagasc. I'm on this poultry farm today to talk about biosecurity measures. Biosecurity measures are put in place on farm to prevent the spread of disease from outside the gate to the farm inside, and also to prevent the spread of disease from this farm to other farms. This video today will outline the key measures put in place to stop disease spread. Vehicles should be parked outside of the farm gate where it is safe to do so. Alternatively, the vehicle should be sprayed down with a suitable disinfectant. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is crucial for the prevention of disease spread. A pair of disposable boot covers should be placed on your feet as you leave the vehicle. Place disposable overalls on now. As you enter the house, a foot dip must be used. All visitors must complete the visitor log. This helps with tracing back if there was a disease issue on farm. A step-over barrier in the store or lobby area creates a distinct difference between clean and dirty zones. A physical barrier indicates the need to place a second pair of boot covers on as you step over. For farm staff, they may use designated clothes and boots for use within the house. These clothes and boots must be put on at this stage. As you leave the house, returning to the store, the outer boots must be removed and placed in a rubbish bin provided. As you return to the vehicle, the disposable overalls are removed and are placed in a rubbish bin. The boot covers are removed as you enter the vehicle and are placed in a rubbish bin. The purpose of the disposable PPE is to protect the farm from any disease being carried on site. They are not designed to keep clothing clean. It is important to dispose of PPE on the site of use and not bring PPE from site to site. If you require any more information regarding biosecurity on farm, take a look at the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine website, or alternatively take a look at the poultry section on teagasc.ie. I just have one other short clip to show, and I'll explain the reason for that after.
It was almost. It was almost in.
Listen, man, would you mind putting on your seatbelt?
See this? He gonna mess you up. Seatbelt.
Would you mind putting on your seatbelt?
Seatbelt. Seatbelt. Overruled.
Listen, man, would you mind putting on your seatbelt?
Sure, not a problem. Right, shall we go?
I'm sure you're all wondering what an RSA video on a seatbelt has to do with biosecurity. And possibly not a lot, but the point of this video is to get the viewer thinking of what might happen if you didn't ask your passengers to wear their seatbelt. What would happen if an accident occurred? Would there be a death or a loss of life? For you as a producer, you are the person in charge of your farm, your business, so the book stops with you. For any visitor who must come on farm, it is crucial that they follow all biosecurity measures you put in place. If they are not following those steps, you must stop them and ask them to wear PPE, use the foot dip provided, and complete the visitor log. What would happen if you didn't? Have to be in contact with bacteria or virus, which may cause an outbreak or harm to your flock? Could that be the loss of that flock? We're always thinking that it's the outsider who's going to carry the disease threat into our farm, but the farmer or the staff are also a threat. They spend the most time inside the house and with the birds, ensuring your farm is safe, so you and your staff must follow all the biosecurity measures each and every day, even during the turnaround period following cleaning and disinfection, is really, really crucial. Don't be afraid to ask the questions of visitors or yourself. What might happen if you don't? So I'm going to introduce Conor. Conor is a poultry vet practicing with St. David's poultry team since 2015, having worked in mixed practice previously. He has completed a master's in poultry production recently, and he'll admit himself that it was mostly an excuse to get away from parenting to his 4 children under 5. Conor is a self-confessed nerd who enjoys burying his head in data analysis and building apps, skills which didn't have any place really in mixed practice, but thankfully he has found a place for these in poultry practice. So Conor, I'll ask you to share your screen and to begin your presentation.
So thanks, Rebecca, for the introduction. So yeah, a lot of what I'll be saying will be largely echoing what Rebecca's already said. To me, biosecurity, there's no big secret to it. So in any course that you go to, you'll gain knowledge, you'll gain skills, or you might gain motivation. Really, the knowledge that you'll gain here watching this, it's mostly stuff that you already know and it's widely available. You've been exposed to this knowledge before, you may or may not have read it. The skills that we're talking about, there's nothing very demanding in skills wise in terms of biosecurity. So you watch the video of the house entry and exit procedure. There's nothing difficult there. There's no real skill involved, but it's not done correctly every time. And to me, that comes down to motivation. So if you don't believe something's important, you're not very motivated to do it correctly, and you'll take a shortcut. It's only if you believe it's important and you're motivated and you have the skills and the knowledge, it just becomes a habit. And if you believe biosecurity is important and it becomes a habit just to follow correct procedures, you won't even have to think about doing it and it'll just come naturally to you. So that's the space I'd like you to be in. So a lot of my presentation here will be just trying to get you to believe it's important rather than specifics, do's and don'ts. I'll come back to it later, but if anyone, in terms of specifics, do's and don'ts on your farm, so coming up with a biosecurity plan, the place to get that advice is at your TASA audit. So that's a auditing scheme that all the different veterinary practices, poultry practices in the country provide, and it's funded by the department. We'll come to your farm, we'll look at the biosecurity failings on your farm, and we'll come up with a potential in some improvements and some advice. And that can be done yearly. So you'll get a score at the end of it, of the TASA audit, and we can see does your biosecurity improve over time. So that's where to get specific advice for your farm. And a lot of this is just to try and convince you to get that advice and believe it's important in the first place. So we saw the step over barrier there and using it. And in order to be it's also important that something is easy to use. It's not just important to know that you should use it. If something's not easy to use, you're less likely to use it. So you need to be even more motivated. So take the foot dip. If you've got to remove a concrete block from the lid of the foot dip, you're less likely to use it. So it's important that so in terms of skills, it's not just the skill of doing it, it's how easy it is to use it. And yeah, it's up to you to provide. If you have visitors coming and you expect them to adhere to a certain standard, you've got to make it easy for them to adhere to that standard. So make an obvious designated parking space. If I don't know where to park, I might break what you consider your biosecurity barrier or your fence. If your foot dip isn't very accessible, I mightn't access it. So make the biosecurity practices easy to follow, and visitors and yourself are more likely to follow them. So I think a lot of people would have seen a slide like this, the improvement in birds over time. It's largely down to genetics. Well, the potential of the birds to improve over time is down to genetics, but nutrition and housing have a factor. But biosecurity in general, that bird in 1957 was probably reared in a multi-species environment, no real biosecurity, and performance wasn't very good. As these birds have evolved over time, the biosecurity, the conditions that they're kept in, has generally gotten better. So the biosecurity has improved, the vaccination has improved. In my opinion, it wouldn't be possible to have a modern poultry sector without Marek's vaccination, for one. So other viruses that hit birds are, well, Gumboro virus is another one. So this is just talking about the importance of biosecurity. So Gumboro virus wouldn't be one that we considered. It doesn't cause the acute losses that it did back in the 60s and 70s and 80s when it first became an issue on farms. And definitely when I started poultry practice in 2015, I wasn't 100% convinced how big an issue it was. It wasn't until we started vaccinating that results improved dramatically. And that was there was vaccination happening previously, but it was vaccination on farm. When we started vaccinating correctly in the hatchery, the results did improve. So clearly Gumboro was causing a big issue, but it wasn't causing acute losses. So I think there's lots of subclinical issues on farms like Gumboro, which aren't causing major losses. So back in 2015, I wasn't arriving onto farms saying you've got a Gumboro issue. But when Gumboro was no longer an issue, results improved. It's the same with a lot of other viruses, and there's a lot of pathogens out there that I can't arrive into your farm and say, oh, you've got a big problem with X here. And if a lot of these issues, they don't manifest as one clinical disease, they just manifest as poor performance. And if you manage to eliminate that problem, your performance will improve. So if your biosecurity is better, if your cleaning and disinfection is better, your performance will improve. So it's not to say that biosecurity isn't all about the big diseases like avian influenza, ILT, salmonella, the ones that grab all the headlines. It's also about the insidious diseases that Gumboro, astroviruses, adenoviruses, they mightn't cause a specific clinical problem all the time, but if you do have them on site, your results are suffering. And the better your biosecurity, the better your results will be. Water hygiene is another insidious challenge that can be on a lot of sites. So we test the water hygiene on all our sites regularly, and the better your water hygiene, the better your birds are performing. Again, it's not most cases it's not causing a specific disease, but your birds are getting continuous exposure to harmful bacteria, which the immune system is having to fight. It's causing poor performance. So if you get the genetics right, the nutrition right, the housing right, yes, you're halfway there, but you have to get the biosecurity, your vaccination, and your water hygiene right to achieve optimum performance. So just what is biosecurity? It's it's a set of management practices which, when followed correctly, reduce the potential for disease coming onto your site or moving between sites. But it should be judged from the perspective of the bird rather than the farm. So as I approach a chicken farm, a chicken house, as I approach chickens, the biosecurity will incrementally increase. So the first step in biosecurity, there should be a fence around the site. I get through that. I go through that. I follow the correct procedures to get through that barrier. Put on my overalls, park outside it, and then the next step, the next barrier I meet is the door to the house with a foot tip outside it. And then as I approach the birds, there's a step over barrier. So it's literally the barrier to biosecurity gets increased as you approach the birds. So it's not just biosecurity isn't just at the farm. It's as you approach the birds gets better. Good biosecurity shouldn't be a reaction to a disease outbreak. So yes, there is ILT on the island at the moment, and occasionally there's avian influenza on the island. And as I drive around people's farms, people get a text from whichever processor they're associated with saying, "Step up your biosecurity." It shouldn't be just a step up in a time of a crisis. Good hygiene and biosecurity practices should be carried out at all times. As I said, it shouldn't be just stepped up when there's a big issue. There's all these other insidious issues that are there all the time, costing you money, not just the big scare ones. So reasons for biosecurity and hygiene: it protects your birds, your business, the industry, and the community. So yes, the industry, if your biosecurity is poor and avian influenza comes into your farm, just everyone in your area, and if a processing plant or a hatchery is close to you, everything could be threatened, and the whole industry will be affected. But the community, biosecurity is also important in terms of protecting the community. Campylobacter, Salmonella, other zoonotic diseases, they can potentially travel from your birds to the community or to yourself and to your family. So good biosecurity, site hygiene, personal hygiene is very important at all times. Now, poultry has inherent advantages over other sectors in terms of biosecurity. The all-in, all-out nature of any farm involved with Borbia is a distinct advantage. There's less disease carryover from site. There's less disease held on. If you don't have a period where the entire site can be cleaned and disinfected, there's always disease on that site in other birds, and it'll continue to circulate and build up over time. Poultry sites, they're generally defined biosecure areas. So you can see exactly where the biosecure area begins and ends, and so it's not like a farm, a traditional cattle farm where there's animals meeting over a hedge. There's a defined area, biosecure area. They're relatively easy to clean. There are a lot of concrete surfaces, paneling, so it's not like a farm again that you don't really know where to start and where to finish your cleaning. I include the dread of exotic diseases in this. So yeah, I'd say good biosecurity should be maintained at all times, but there is these exotic diseases out there that people are afraid of. And when there is one of these scares in the country, biosecurity does tend to get stepped up a bit, and people are more aware of it, and they keep those practices. They might lapse to a certain extent, but this dread of exotic diseases does keep the awareness of biosecurity high. And also, the structure of the industry is an advantage to me. So there's a lot of top-down control within the poultry sector, the broiler sector particularly, and really everyone that's in the commercial poultry sector does adhere to certain standards. There is no cowboy out there. There's nobody out there threatening your business, because if there is, they won't stay involved with those processors for long, and they won't be in business for long threatening your business. So if I said there's 3 key levels of biosecurity: conceptual biosecurity, which is where your house is built. I don't know what my audience is, but I expect a lot of you have chicken houses, and where they are is already decided. Structural biosecurity, so that's how your house is maintained, and operational biosecurity. So operational biosecurity to me is where the most gains and the most gains can be made, and where the most flaws can be identified. Structural biosecurity, everyone's house will be of a certain standard if you're involved with one of the processing companies, and they can come out and see your site and judge you and tell you what you need to change. It's the operational biosecurity that they can't really account for every day. So nobody's there watching you every day, what you're doing, whether you're using your step over barrier correctly, whether you're hand washing correctly. It's only if you it's only when something goes wrong that these flaws might be identified. So if you don't believe this is important, it's up to you to do these things. And if you don't believe it's important, you may not do it. So it's the operational biosecurity. It's not just for when there's an auditor on your site. You've got to believe it's important and just do it yourself every day. And you've got to do it by habit every day. So yeah, conceptual biosecurity is the site planning, and ideally you'd be away from waterways, away from other poultry sites. But look, this for a lot of people, that ship has sailed. If you are thinking of building a chicken house, yeah, sit down with your processing company and decide what the best place to build it, or maybe your vet. Structural biosecurity, that's the house design, how easy it is to clean, the site layout. Older sites with some upgrades can still have very good structural biosecurity. So it's definitely don't give up just because your site isn't as easy to clean and maintain as somebody with a brand new site with steel framed house and everything just very easy to work in. Your sites still have to be of a certain standard, and but as I said, it's operational biosecurity where a lot of mistakes are made and a lot of the shortcuts are taken. I said nobody's there to watch you at all times. You just need to believe it's important. In terms of operational biosecurity, one thing, there should be no shared staff or equipment between farms. It's also important that you don't visit other farms. So Rebecca mentioned at the start, like COVID has improved a lot of people's understanding of biosecurity. And one of the main things is if you don't need to visit someone's house, you didn't visit their house. Houses with only essential visitors. The same way your chicken house site should only be, it's only essential visitors that should ever visit. But you also shouldn't visit anyone else's site. And in my opinion, whatever about someone else's site that's of a similar biosecurity standard to you definitely should not visit any backyard poultry sites. So I'm probably talking to an audience that have chickens. That doesn't mean you're the local chicken expert in wherever you're from. You'll see more. You're likely to see more diseases in visiting your average backyard flock than you are in all the commercial flocks within the group you're involved with. So don't have very little to do with any backyard poultry. Don't employ somebody that has backyard poultry. Don't visit them, and definitely don't have them yourself. I'm a vet. I could potentially get some revenue from treating backyard poultry, and I have nothing to do with them. So because I don't want to be a threat to you, and you definitely should not have anything to do with backyard poultry as well. As the visitors, but just to emphasize a point, this good biosecurity isn't just for visitors though. It's also important for you. So if we agree that a visitor has an increased chance of bringing a disease onto your farm than what you have. So if a visitor has a 1 in 50 chance of bringing something onto your farm, but he only comes once, that's a 2% chance. If you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of bringing something onto your farm, but you do the same practice 1,000 times, that actually works out at about a 60% chance of bringing a disease onto your farm. So it's not, biosecurity is yes, important for visitors, but it's equally important for you. Just don't take any shortcuts yourself. Now, there is an influence of bird type in biosecurity. So yes, I would like everybody to have perfect biosecurity at all times, but some birds are more valuable than others. So if I take a pedigree flock, I mean, I will never see a pedigree flock unless I don't know how would I need 6 months away from poultry before they'd ever consider allowing me to enter the building. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever see a pedigree flock. They're very high security. But the same grandparents and breeders and layers, they're longer lived birds, they're higher value, they have more full vaccination programs. They do have fewer visitors throughout the flock, so practices that do exist in the broiler industry, like thinning, aren't in that sector. So there is less biosecurity compromises in the grandparents and breeders. So we'd like that everyone's of a certain standard, but sometimes we live in the real world, and there is some more compromises in the shorter lived birds. They don't get the same vaccination, and even free range, having free range broilers. Okay, you have free range layers as well, but having free range broilers to me, it's a big threat to any industry. If you in Holland, sorry, that slide is just there because that is a grandparent farm, and that's the closest I've ever been to one. I wouldn't even get that close to a pedigree farm because they're in much more isolated areas than that. But this is a picture from a Dutch free range. Well, consider what they have as their higher welfare bird, and there's their pop holes at the side, but they actually don't go outside fully. They stay inside because they lost 15 million birds to AI back in 2001, and now their consumer was educated that birds can have high welfare, low stocking densities, all the things that our current free range birds have, but not fully free range. And the biosecurity is better in these birds. They're not as big there isn't as large a threat, but that might just maybe we might need to there might need to be a large correction to our free range industry through AI before that ever happens here, and hopefully it doesn't ever happen. It's just a typical site, nice, well-fenced site, nothing special. That's what I'd be fairly used to every day. It's good, clean, good, nice concrete. Everything is fairly right, well-fenced. This is a slightly better site that you've got your changing area at the gate, and that's where you park. Just if you look at the previous one, there wasn't a defined parking space with somewhere to change. So this one is definitely better. This particular site, you have to get from one side to the other, you have to take off there's 2 rooms with a shower between them, and to go from one room to the other, you have to go through that shower. That would be fairly typical on the few grandparent sites that are in this country and some of our breeder sites. But in Holland, that is typical on every broiler farm. And that might be the level that everyone should be at. So how does disease spread? So we've talked about people being a major issue. Bedding, okay, most of your bedding is it's coming from an approved source. I wouldn't ever use bedding from home chopped straw that's been stored in a hay barn with whatever sitting inside in it, mice, rats, cats. It needs to come from an approved source. Day-old chicks, day-old chicks can bring diseases onto your site. There has been cases of salmonella enteritis and stuff coming with day-old chicks. I wouldn't include yolk sac infection as a source of infection coming with day-old chicks. Those chicks will die that have yolk sac infection. Get rid of them as quickly as possible. Don't bother treating them. It's only keeping a few birds alive that are harboring infection, are living for longer, their welfare is suffering. Just kill them off as quickly as possible if there is yolk sac infection, and it's not contagious to the other birds provided you remove them quickly and they get that bacteria out of the site. Feed and water. Most of our feed is heat treated in this country. I don't believe there's many cases where the feed is an issue. The water coming onto your site, I don't believe is a massive issue either. You're not allowed to use water from an open water source. There has been cases in the UK of avian influenza coming from open water sources where ducks and swans were living on that water, but you're not allowed to use that. No one in my knowledge uses an open water source in this country. And the water coming onto the sites is all tested. It's the water within the water lines, to me, is more of a problem. For better or worse, there's a lot of products do go down our water lines, and those products can contribute to biofilm buildup. I dispense a lot of these products. I advise them, and I like to think every product that I advise, the benefits outweigh the negatives. But there are negatives, and the negatives can be biofilm buildup and bacteria growing in your water lines. And it's very important to not allow that happen. So some people would chlorinate their water continuously with sodium hypochlorite, and yes, that will keep your water safe to drink, but it won't actually remove the biofilm. To me, hydrogen peroxide, potentiated silver compounds are the best for removing biofilm. But chlorine dioxide, so not sodium hypochlorite, chlorine dioxide is very good at removing biofilm. And that's one that I would increasingly recommend. Now, it's a bit more expensive, your startup costs, but the chemicals themselves, once you are set up, are very cheap. So if anyone's site is of a certain scale, that the startup costs aren't as important. It's where the running costs are more important. I would recommend the sodium dioxide, the chlorine dioxide, sorry, as more of a solution. It's also, because the chemicals themselves are so cheap, it's of benefit throughout your farm if you have other species on your farm. People, yes, very definitely. We've touched on that. Transport, so ideally cut down all the transports, minimize transport as much as possible into your site. So anyone that doesn't have to come in, doesn't come in. Feed lorries, if they do have to come in, well, try and spray them down, as Rebecca says, but we can't really stop them coming in. Some sites can actually fill their feed bins from outside the site, but very few. The dead lorry, though, that is one that you can keep off your site. You should definitely bring your dead bin out to the dead lorry, because that dead lorry should not be coming onto your site. Ideally, your dead bin itself is not kept on your site, and you carry the dead birds out to the dead bin. But very definitely, the dead lorry should not come onto your site. In my opinion, the best way to deal with deads is to freeze them, and at the end of the batch, remove them. So there is the freezing them stops any flies coming to your dead bin. It's much more hygienic and much more satisfactory. Vermin clearly are an issue and bring a lot of diseases onto your farm. But also, if you employ a professional company to come and do your rodent control, the person doing the rodent control, they're walking around all those areas where the vermin are living, and they could potentially bring something onto your site as well. So you're the biosecurity officer on your site. If you see somebody that's involved in vermin control or whatever, that's not doing the correct biosecurity practices that you mandate, you need to pull them up on it. Yeah, we said about other birds, with wild birds and free-range sites are a risk, and you need to do everything you can to stop wild birds coming onto your site. So if they are a problem, consult your vet and come up with a plan for getting those birds off your site. So yeah, just the visitors. I think we've said a lot about visitors already. Probably, yeah, we've got all that said. Cleaning and disinfection. So to me, cleaning is the more important part than disinfection. The solution to pollution is dilution, is something that would have been drilled into us in vet college, that cleaning it, and so water is the best disinfectant. The more you can remove organic matter, bacteria, not even have to disinfect them. If you just remove them with water, that's the best way of getting rid of them. But choosing a disinfectant, again, you can discuss that with your veterinary company partners, and they'll advise you. Like some like phenols might work better in the presence of if you have timber houses, some of them work better in winter time, and yeah, that's all different. There's a lot of different reasons why you might choose one or over the other, and that's something you should discuss with your veterinary partner. But definitely cleaning is the most important thing. So cleaning to me needs to be, some people would not do it as a two-stage process. So every house, when it's being cleaned, the heavy matter should be removed, the litter, the house blown down. Then you should do a wet clean. So power hose everything down, clean it until it's visibly clean. And then put on your detergent, foam on your detergent, and clean your house again. You don't put on your detergent the first time you wash, you put it on the second time you wash. So yeah, cleaning, detergent to me is crucial. Your dishwasher doesn't use disinfectant, but you're happy to eat off it. It uses detergent. Water, yeah, I've definitely said about water, and it's not water coming onto your site that's the problem. It's the water in your water lines. It doesn't, as I say, cause a primary disease. It's just low. It just affects performance. If you're in City's background, bacterial challenge, constantly challenging the birds, that'll stimulate an immune system. It's just affecting your performance, and you need to do something about that. In terms of cleaning, most of your sites are swabbed. It's part of Board B now, and for the broilers, that they're all swabbed prior to the next boards being placed. And I think that's a very useful tool. Some of the growers mightn't like the fact that there's someone coming onto your site continuously monitoring, but that's not the way to look at it. They're not monitoring the grower; they're monitoring the cleaning, disinfection. So they're putting a bit of pressure. You should use it as a tool to know how well your site has been cleaned and disinfected, and step up your cleaning, disinfection if it's not being done correctly. It's not; these things aren't something to beat you up with. You should use it you should see it as something as a service. If the company you're involved with is providing that service, you should see it as a service. We said about biofilm build up, and it can be down to whatever products down to drinker lines and needs to be removed. So it can be at the blind end of a pipe, and it can be at sagging pipe work. So like if your water is being tested and it's been found that the water hygiene isn't good, you need to go through your entire water system to see where these defects are that the cleaning agents aren't getting to. Some of the older sites, there's pipe work that mightn't make a lot of sense. It was put in and then something was changed and a pipe wasn't used anymore. But those old pipes are still connected and they can still be sources of bacteria. So you might need to go through your full pipe work to try and identify those areas where your cleaning agent isn't getting to. I do think that water hygiene is something that the poultry sector has focused on in the last few years, and we have reaped the benefits. And I do think that there's a lot of benefits that other sectors could also reap if they follow the practices that follow the poultry water hygiene practices. So people with cows mightn't believe it's as important because it all goes into a rumen and it's a big fermentation vat, but definitely there's calves that are monogastrics that their stomach is similar to chickens. So if there's a background bacterial challenge, they're as likely to underperform. There's also disease transmission at water troughs or in your milking parlour, that if your water is hygienic, you're less likely, or if there's a cleaning agent in it at all times, these are less likely to be issues. So I do think other sectors can learn from poultry. And as I come back to the chlorine dioxide, if somebody has a large poultry unit and the cattle unit, they'll by treating one, they'll treat the other, and they'll reap benefits in both. So your step over barriers, we've said about them at the start and the importance of using them correctly. I think everyone knows how to use them, but it's just using them correctly all the time is what people don't do. This is a two-stage step over barrier. So in this, you leave your boots on one side, you put on your overalls and wash your hands in the middle, and then you put on your house boots on the other. And that has been, some companies would definitely swear by this as being the crucial in reducing diseases like Campylobacter. Most of the sites I go to don't use a two-stage step over barrier. It's more something like this in the middle of your store. That's a good barrier. To me, it goes all the way to the ground. It's something you can sit on. There isn't shavings and stuff being taken out of the house and lodging on one side and then going under the barrier, and just the whole store. But really, that's not really a barrier. That's a good barrier. But to me, I would actually prefer if the barrier was located where that orange box is at the door itself. I think with the best will in the world, a barrier like this, you might step over that, you might use it correctly, put on your boots on one side, realize you've forgotten something, and step back over in your house, in your chicken house boots. it's because you're still in your store. It's not, you haven't left your store. So, but if those chicken house boots live in the chicken house and your barrier is at the actual door to the chicken house, I think people are less likely to walk out of their chicken house into their store if those boots were never in the store in the first place. I believe as well, if in terms of creating a 2-stage barrier, if you have another barrier like that orange box at the entrance to the store, so maybe just leave a square big enough to take off your boots, your yard boots, and step into your store. Maybe put on a pair of Crocs or just leave on your socks. I think we saw the farmer in the video there was just what he uses. That's what he does, and he walks around his store in his socks. And then so you've got two barriers. You've got your 2-stage barrier, but your entire store is the amber zone. The red zone is completely outside, and the green zone is completely in your chicken house. Rather than this video where it's all contained. The 3 zones are within the store. I'd have the entire store, the amber zone, and a step over barrier at both doors. Personal hygiene. Really, if you have to explain personal hygiene to somebody, you're probably talking to the wrong audience. Like, really, if somebody doesn't understand personal hygiene, they're always going to take shortcuts. It's not just the birds we're protecting from anything you can bring in from outside. If your personal hygiene isn't great, you bring something home to your loved ones, to immunocompromised people. So really, hand washing after every task, using showering facilities, and I showering before and after contact ideally, but that mightn't happen every time. But definitely the hand washing and wearing overalls into your chicken house and taking them off as you come out. Just doing as much as you can for just protect yourself and whoever you have at home, as well as the chickens. Personal protective equipment. So again, there has been very few negatives out of COVID, but the increased awareness of biosecurity and also the increased acceptance of face masks I think are a big thing. So I'd always wear a face mask in the chicken house. It's more to protect myself than the bird. It is something the bird might get some element of protection from anything I'm carrying, but really it's to protect me from the dust and dander within that chicken house, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or might trigger asthma or whatever. That's the reason I'd always wear a face mask. And I think people have got more used to wearing face masks and shop and everything, and I'd encourage all my farmers to wear face masks. This mightn't be strictly for biosecurity reasons, for bringing something to the farm. It's just to protect yourself. A proper face mask is a P2 or P3 filter face mask, not the blue one that you wear to the shop every day. But any PPE is only as good as the likelihood of you wearing it. So if it's comfortable, you're more likely to wear it. And if you're employing people and they're not wearing the PPE, you've got to find out why they're not wearing it. If it's because it's not comfortable, it's your fault. If they just can't be bothered, that's their fault. But PPE is crucial, protecting the birds as well as you. There is legislation on biosecurity, but to me, the legislation, if you're only satisfying a legislative requirement, you're not really at the races. Like, the biosecurity legislation, to me, is a lot weaker than what you need to be doing. Like, there's nobody telling you that you have to wear overalls and use step over barriers. Like, there is legislation. You could find it, and you can find it online. But that's not legislation, but that's what you need to be doing. So if you're only satisfying a legislative requirement, you won't be satisfying the requirement of any processor group or board BIA. So you can look up the scheme, the board BIA scheme requirements, for more information on biosecurity, or, as I said, contact your vet and arrange a TASA audit. So I said it's a funded biosecurity audit, which all practices are providing. It's site-specific advice. So I'm not getting into much advice here. It's like any specific advice. Most of what I'm saying is largely general. In terms of specific advice that I often give on farms in these audits, I often mention step over barriers. I often mention collecting the dust from the feed bins. The dead lorries is something that's a failing that I commonly highlight, that the dead lorries are coming onto the sites rather than dead bins being carried out. I commonly say, but people aren't wearing overalls. Most sites I go to, people do change their boots. The step over barrier mightn't be constructed in such a way that I'd like, but it is at least being used while I'm there. But then I'm looking at litter in the entire store, so I'm wondering if it's being tracked over there. Is the step over barrier used correctly when I'm not there? Overalls, so most people do use this to change their boots at least, but a lot of people don't put on overalls. General tidiness and spraying weeds and stuff is another common thing that I do write down on my audits. Site fencing, that's crucial, and there isn't many chicken houses that I go to that I can't drive straight up to the door. I'd like to say that I don't drive straight up to the door every time, or ever, but if it's raining and if I'm in a rush and you don't have a fence around your site, I might take that shortcut. I understand biosecurity, but I still might take that shortcut. So it's up to you. You're the biosecurity officer. You need to designate that parking space. Make it difficult for me to break your rules and make it easy for me to follow them. And water hygiene monitoring as well is another thing that I constantly emphasize on farms. And if someone doesn't know this hygiene of their water, they need to check it. They need to get it tested. Testing is very cheap, and if it is wrong, you need to address it. So I do a few other specific control measures for specific diseases, but I don't know, Rebecca, I think we've probably enough there said, have we, on biosecurity?
Yeah, Conor, that's excellent. We're just coming right up to time, so we'll take a few questions and then we'll wrap up for today. So I suppose just to really start off pretty simple or straightforward, for you, when does biosecurity begin? Would you be saying it begins the second the birds land on the farm, or is it before that?
Well, they should never lapse. Whether the birds are on, whether you have birds on the site or not, you need to maintain the fence around the site and still not allow visitors. Definitely your chicken house itself, from the moment that the house is disinfected, you've got to treat it as if there's birds in that house, and use your step over barriers correctly every time you go in and out. But yeah, your standards should be good all the time, and definitely after. But from the time your house is disinfected, it's got to be as if you've got birds in sight. Okay,
perfect. And in terms of the ideal distance between farms, whether it be between broiler farms, then from broiler to breeder, or even grandparent flock, like how far do you think is necessary? I know it's difficult when you come to areas like Cavan and Monaghan where we're with poultry, but in an ideal world, how
yeah, look, I definitely in the TASA audits which we do, it's they break it down by, if there's a farm less than 100 meters from you, obviously comes out as the bottom score. Between 100 and a kilometer is middle, is amber, and then over a kilometer is good. I don't like to say there's hard and fast rules on things like this. If you've got high trees between one site and another, it's of benefit and there's less airborne spread. But it doesn't matter how close or far you are to somebody if there's a vehicle or a person moving between the sites. So most things are not airborne. I know some diseases can be airborne, but even if it is an airborne disease, or it might consider it an airborne disease, it might be a bird carrying it, and that bird is going to travel much more than a kilometer. So I don't like to say there's any hard and fast rules about how far you should be. It's just having good procedures in place, and further away is better. Like the pedigree sites, they're in the most remote places possible. In the real world, you just got to build your site wherever you can, and especially in Cavan, you're likely to be close to somebody. And just if you've got good procedures, hopefully you won't have an issue. The avian influenza that did consider to be airborne spread, I think if the litter and stuff had been damped down prior to birds being caught, there would have been less airborne spread. So it's not just distance. You can mitigate even airborne spread by good practices.
Perfect. A really important question, a really valid point as well. Are people obliged to notify the department if they have a backyard flock, particularly near a site? So I suppose from a point of view, even if you only have one bird, you are required to notify the department. You can complete what's called a PR1 form, which is available on the department website, and it's really important to do that.
I'm not sure about that. I know that when the department are dealing with avian influenza, they do make distinctions between a commercial flock and a backyard flock. Because if a backyard flock gets it, the commercial sector mightn't be as affected. But if you have a backyard flock and a commercial flock, I don't really know where to draw a distinction in that case.
Yes.
But no, nobody should have a backyard flock. If you do, you're just mad. Just get rid of those birds. Like your processor should be telling you just eliminate them and have nothing to do with them.
Perfect. And I suppose just one last question, because I'm conscious we're just gone slightly over time. Do you think disinfectant mats are worthwhile, or are you better with a foot dip?
Oh, I think disinfection mats, if they're in the chicken house store, have benefits. Obviously, if they're outside, they're getting covered and the rain is going into them continuously, and they're of no benefit there. If they're constantly being diluted. If they're within the chicken house store, they're of benefit. But to me, no, the step. I'm not actually as. I'm not. I don't like most times your boots. There's organic matter on your boots. I'm not a massive believer in disinfecting my boots as such. I just change them, put on the plastic over boots. I think it's of an awful lot more benefit than any disinfectant bat. They're lucky underbore B and stuff. You have to have them, but no, I'm not a big believer in them. Just change your boots. Does an awful lot more. You don't, and for something like Coxie, if you've got Coxie on your boots, you'd have to stand into a formaldehyde disinfectant for half an hour before it would kill the Coxie. That's just one example. Like this, and if your boots are actually dirty, that's a clean boot. If your boots are dirty, you have to stay in there for longer. So, no, to me, a lot of cases, unless you're washing your welly before using stepper, before using the foot dip, and you're doing very little by using them. Just change your boots. The two-stage step over barrier to me is the best way to do it.
Perfect. Conor, thank you so much for joining me today. Really important topic to cover, and really highlights that it's a day-to-day issue. As you say, it's not just when we have a big disease threat such as avian influenza or AILT as we do at the moment. So I hope you all learned something from today's talk, and that we can all increase our biosecurity measures when we visit farms or are on our own farms. I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and just remind you that we will be back on June 30th for the talk with Martin Dempsey and an SEAI representative and SSRH. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.